Hello, lovely friend. I am Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
We are doctors
and weight management and metabolic health experts.
And this is the Real Health and Weight Loss Podcast. Hello, lovely friend. Dr. Mary here for another fabulous episode, joined by my delightful colleague, Dr. Lucy. How are you going this summery day, Dr. Lucy?
Well, you know, summer is my spirit season. You can have a spirit animal. I figure you can have a spirit season.
Yep.
I do love a bit of summer. I love the sunshine. I love a bit of warmth. But as you all know, if you listen to one of our previous episodes, I have had another melanoma, so I'm very careful with my sunlight and make sure I optimize my morning light, stay out of the, harsh, daytime light and use some sun protection.
Very sensible. Balance. In all things, balance is what we need.
Indeed.
We do. And speaking of balance, one thing that we want to have in really good balance is our serum insulin levels. And we thought that today we could get back to a bit of science, bit of science-backed basics with talking about insulin resistance. And it's incredibly common. I can't tell you how many times as a GP I have, perhaps met someone for the first time and it's a really relatable story. The person might have normal blood sugar. So, they've never ever thought that there was anything wrong with their insulin signaling. If they ever thought about it, blood sugars are normal, but their triglycerides are a bit high. They've got this weight that they are really struggling to lose. Their blood pressure is going up. Nobody has mentioned insulin resistance. It's quite a common story. I think more awareness about it now, but insulin resistance is the epidemic of our time, a silent killer, and something that we really need to be talking more about.
Absolutely, because it really is. It's the canary in the coal mine for chronic disease. And people develop insulin resistance many years before they become unwell or before they have the hallmarks of chronic disease. But during this time, they're potentially still suffering. There are things that are happening to them, symptoms, signs that affect their well-being or the way they're living, particularly around hunger. And they have no idea that it's because they're insulin resistant. And look, phenomenally common, particularly in some parts of our society, up to 80% of people have insulin resistance. And it does get worse as we get older. But what we're seeing with just the changes in health is that people are developing it younger these days. So instead of most people developing insulin resistance maybe in their 60s, 70s, 80s, we're seeing people developing it, even in childhood, but certainly 20s, 30s, 40s, and then really manifesting with significant chronic disease in their 50s instead of in their 80s.
Yes, and it really is important. Like, it's a low-grade emergency, I think, this epidemic of insulin resistance in our society right now, because it isn't just benign. It's not just like, oh, well, you may or may not develop type 2 diabetes in 10 years' time. People who have insulin resistance, it is hurting them right now and significantly increasing their risk of chronic disease and all the things that can rob us of, our joy in our retirement, in our glory years. Diabetes, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver, strokes, cancers, lots and lots of issues. Neurodegenerative disease, like dementia, are all linked to insulin resistance. They all have this similar root cause, which is insulin resistance. And you and I, Lucy, are passionate about helping people reverse insulin resistance. It's basically why we do what we do. We feel very, very strongly about it. Could we perhaps, Lucy, you could do this. You're the analogy queen. Could we explain to people what insulin resistance is?
Yes, absolutely. So insulin is a hormone made by our pancreas. It is essential to life. We don't want no insulin. So again, it's very easy to demonize something and go, oh, insulin spikes. We definitely need insulin. It is extremely important because it moves glucose from our blood. So glucose comes from sugars and starches and is the fuel that runs most of our body. and it moves it from the blood into the cells, into our muscle cells, into every single cell really. And any that is left over from the food that we've eaten, it will move it into the muscle cells to store as glycogen and also then into the liver. And then once those stores are full, it will move it into our fat cells. So that all happens because of insulin. So if we didn't have insulin, well, we know what happens. If you don't have insulin, you have type 1 diabetes. It's untreated, it's lethal. So insulin is good. We don't want to be, cast shade on insulin. But like Goldilocks, too much of a good thing is unhelpful. So for some people, and we'll go through why some people are affected and some people aren't, what happens is that our insulin signaling, so our cells become a bit resistant to insulin. So what that means effectively is that you need more insulin to do the same job. And that's okay. The pancreas is very, very good organ. We love the pancreas. It will make more insulin. Blood's happy because sugar's moved out back into the cells. Everything seems to be going along okay under the hood, except the pancreas is working really hard. So it's making more and more insulin. Our blood insulin levels get higher, and we can only know that on a blood test. Like, we don't have a finger pricker or any other way to check. It's only a blood test that will tell you what your serum or your blood insulin levels are. And the problem for this is that insulin's other gig, it has a number of other little jobs, but one of its other jobs is to stop fat breakdown. Because why would you want to be breaking down your fat when you're trying to utilize your sugars? Like, that would be crazy. It's like having one of those cars that can run on petrol or on gas. They don't run at the same time. You switch between them. And why would the body want to be burning fat and storing fat at the same time? So when insulin is high, you cannot access your stored body fat. And this is a problem, because this is not how we're meant to run. We're meant to be able to dip in and out of our stored fuel. That's what it's for, is to be able to access easily so that we can just run our day-to-day life. We can think our day-to-day thoughts. We can move our day-to-day body by accessing stored fuel. And if we can't access it, well, then the result is that we're hungry, brain's way of saying you need some fuel, and we're tired, body's way of saying I don't have any fuel. This is really unhelpful for your day-to-day living, to be tired and hungry.
And yet it is so very, very common. Beyond that, the high insulin is a pro-inflammatory state, and it drives a whole lot of chronic diseases that rob us of years of our life and rob us of our quality of life. So, yeah, it's very important that we do what we can to get our insulin just right, Goldilocks.
Absolutely. And beyond that, I think the sequelae of having high insulin, 1, you don't even know you've got it. 2, you can't access your stored fuel. 3, it actually has a direct effect on our kidneys. So there's a little cell in the kidney called the podocyte, which is, called the podocyte because it looks like a foot or something.
Yeah, under a microscope. Yeah.
Yeah. It is toxic to kidney cells and causes the destruction of renal function long before the development of type 2 diabetes. It is a growth hormone, and so promotes the growth of many cancers. And it also promotes the growth of the endothelial cells in our blood vessels, and so contributes to high blood pressure, because high blood pressure comes from some vascular stiffening because these cells are bigger and thicker than they're meant to be. And that's just off the top of my head. Like, I haven't even looked this up. I just happen to know all of these. And I'm sure there's many, many other things.
Oh, so many. And back to that, how it promotes that endothelial cell dysfunction. So the endothelial cells, the lining of our arteries, which then promotes atherosclerosis and a prothrombotic state, which increases our risk of heart attacks and strokes. Fatty liver. Insulin resistance drives fat accumulation in the liver. The liver does not like being a fat storing organ, but high insulin forces it to do that. And now non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is the leading cause of liver failure and liver transplants in the Western world. My story, high insulin drives polycystic ovarian syndrome and causes increased androgens, the male sex hormones in women, and can affect ovulation. And so targeting insulin resistance is actually like a key therapeutic role, key therapeutic target in managing PCOS, and that's been helpful for me. And our brain gets insulin resistance, so we can get that neurodegenerative disease and dementia from insulin resistance in the brain. And some people call Alzheimer's dementia type 3 diabetes. And you mentioned that it's a growth factor as well. And so hyperinsulinemia, that's increased insulin in the blood, and insulin resistance is associated with the increased risk of many cancers, which could potentially be driven through that growth hormone effect. So yes, lots and lots of reasons why you want to A, know if you have insulin resistance, and B, do something about it. Do you want to talk about the potential drivers of insulin resistance? That would be, I think, helpful for people to understand as well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, what are the causes? Why did some people have insulin resistance? Some people don't. So, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, one of the main drivers is refined carbohydrates and sugars. We've got strong evidence that these drive high insulin and that the body can get overwhelmed by the sugar and starches and in our diet that can lead to insulin resistance and increased insulin over time. Visceral fat also, it's a bit of a chicken and an egg situation then. High insulin can cause that increased abdominal visceral fat, which is highly metabolically active, but it's also highly inflammatory, and it releases signals and free fatty acids that then can impair insulin signaling, which can then make it even worse. And inflammation in general is a driver of insulin resistance, as is stress. High cortisol, especially chronic stress, can drive insulin resistance through various biochemical mechanisms. Poor sleep does that as well. Low muscle mass is potentially a driver, or it could be another way of saying that is just improving muscle mass helps us improve our insulin resistance. And gut dysbiosis has a role too, possibly through the inflammation, how having poor gut health can lead to systemic inflammation. But not everybody develops this the same way. So it really is quite complicated, and it's a complex interplay between your genetics and your environment, and how your body interacts with your environment around you, and how your body responds to your behaviors and your habits that are going to, dictate who gets insulin resistance and who doesn't. But I think the empowering thing here is that by changing habits, we can do a lot to change our physiology and help reverse insulin resistance.
Yes. And I think it's really important for people to realise that developing insulin resistance, it's not your fault. There's, as you said, Mez, there's genetics at play. We know that genes are involved. Anyone who says, humans have been living for thousands of years, it's not the genetics, it's the food. They don't understand epigenetics. They don't understand that genes get switched off and on. And particularly a fetus in utero is very susceptible to epigenetics. So we've got, therefore, people that are more vulnerable to the environment that we now live in. And I think it's a way less judgy way to be looking at it, because you can have two people who eat the same, perhaps, who live the same life, but yet one of them develops insulin resistance and stores body fat like crazy, and the other person seemingly, can eat whatever they like and doesn't seem to have any effect. So we do need to be really mindful that you can't make any judgment about someone's behavior based on their external appearance. I think it's really easy for us to fall into that trap and think, those people just, the narrative is they are lazy and just eat McDonald's all day. That is often far from the truth. The other little blip, I guess, that happens particularly for women, and women are susceptible to insulin resistance at puberty, where, as you said, girls can develop polycystic ovarian syndrome. Pregnancy, women develop gestational diabetes, and then menopause. Women that weren't insulin resistant become insulin resistant. So the female sex hormones have a large interplay with the metabolic hormones.
Yes. So if someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, oh, geez, I wonder, maybe I have insulin resistance. Number one, how could they find out? And number two, what should they do about it?
Yeah. So number one, again, there's some things that you can look for that aren't necessarily blood tests. So we certainly know that if your waist circumference, if you store most of your body fat in the middle, so, you're the apple as opposed to the pear. So for women, if your waist is over 88 centimetres, men, it's a bit over 102 centimetres, your risk of developing or having insulin resistance is higher. If you've got lots of skin tags, again, skin tags are normal. Everyone has some. But if you have more than perhaps is common, particularly around your neck, under your arms, groin, under your breasts, then that might be insulin resistance. And some people get funny little patches of brown skin or brown pigmentation that sort of feels like, you're trying to rub off a stain like dirt or something. And again, groin, under your armpits, they're more common. So you might have some of those. Or you might have some blood tests that you've had. And you mentioned earlier, Mares, about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which has actually been renamed to metabolic fatty liver disease, although like everything, changing of names takes a while. You might have high triglycerides, you might have low HDL, but you might actually just have high serum insulin if anyone has ever checked it. And you can absolutely have pathology tests where we would check your fasting blood glucose with your fasting blood insulin and calculate something called your HOMA-IR, and that is certainly a good clue. Or a more extensive test for somebody who is not on a low carbohydrate lifestyle is something called an insulin curve. And this is like a glucose tolerance test that many people have had either to check for diabetes or, in either normal life or pregnant life. And you can actually have insulin levels done with these. And this is a super interesting test. It's quite arduous because it takes 2 hours and yada, yada. But I've seen many people with normal glucose responses to a glucose tolerance test with sky-high insulin levels. And again, just indicates pancreas working really hard under the hood to keep your glucose levels low.
What should we do about it if we know or suspect that we have insulin resistance?
Well, our favourite things. So technically, there's not a lot of effective medications, because if we were just to reduce insulin, let's just say, oh, well, God, the pancreas is making too much insulin. Let's just bring the insulin down. Well, the glucose will go high because insulin's job is to move glucose into the cell. And so if you're insulin resistant, it has to make a lot of insulin to do that. So you're really trying to sensitize your body to insulin, to make insulin work more effectively rather than just stop high insulin. And so we can do that with there's a bucket load of lifestyle measures, which we love, of course. And we've sort of summarized these into the 6 S's. So, we've been through these before, but we would tell you the first S, sustenance, your low carb lifestyle. Reducing carbohydrates and sugars and starches is the single best thing you can do to reduce the work the pancreas has to do. So the pancreas doesn't have to process all these sugars and starches. It doesn't have to make as much insulin. So therefore, it lowers it. Like it's not rocket science.
Oh, it's pretty basic, yes.
Yeah. We can do strength and movement. So moving your body after eating in particular utilizes the glucose. So the body doesn't have to store it. It uses it. So that's helpful. Building muscle, again, as a longer term option, but building muscle means your body has more places to store glycogen. Your muscle is your metabolic organ. It uses more fuel at rest. And so it sensitizes your body to insulin. So that's helpful. Your favorite thing to talk about, Mares, is stress management. How does that help?
So stress management helps lower our cortisol levels, helps normalize them. And when we can normalize our cortisol level, this has a cascade that flows through all of our metabolic hormones, including insulin, and just doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be sweeping changes. You don't have to get rid of everything in your life that annoys you ever, but small moments of calm, small moments of relaxation can help regulate your nervous system so that you can have improved cortisol and metabolic hormones.
Absolutely. Sleep, super important, really important, so important, in fact. So we know that disturbed sleep, reduced quality of sleep worsens insulin resistance. We know that improving sleep improves insulin resistance. Like it's almost linear. There are lots of causes of sleep disturbance, so addressing that is important. Number one, though, you have to go to bed. Like, honestly, half the reason people are sleep deprived is they actually don't spend enough time in bed. Like, you can't get 7.5 hours sleep if you're only in your bed for 5 hours. So certainly going to bed is helpful. But, again, making sure that you don't have sleep apnea, or if you do have sleep apnea, getting it checked and tested and treated is vital. And I guess part of stress management flows into sleep too, because people often don't sleep well because they've got a lot of stress and they haven't got enough skills to manage that. We often just wish the stress would go away. Quite often that's not possible, but we need to learn skills to be able to manage that stress so that we can sleep well and rejuvenate and reduce our insulin.
Yes. And the other S, sunlight, also very important for sleep. Sounds like a strange thing to say, but it is. Particularly that morning sunlight helps us set our circadian rhythms. And our circadian rhythms is also hormones. Everything is hormonal, but our circadian rhythm is a hormonal little interplay in our body between cortisol and melatonin and other hormones. And they're like little conductor hormones that then can help regulate all the other hormones. And so getting some morning sunlight to help set your circadian rhythms is helpful for your insulin resistance.
Absolutely. And look, social connection, I don't know that there's a direct link on social connection and insulin resistance, but we do know that humans are social creatures. We need to feel that we belong somewhere. We need to feel connected to something. And without that, we really don't thrive. Loneliness is an inflammatory state. So developing social connection in whatever way that looks for you is really important, adding sort of meaning to your life. So the 6 S's for success are really designed around improving insulin resistance, which is the root cause of the majority of our chronic disease and steals our glory years.
It's very important and largely within our control to improve.
Absolutely. So friends, focus, 6 S's for success, and we will be back next week with another episode of the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast.
Bye now.
The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualized medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. Please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.